What a captured alien told me about the return of Jesus still haunts me to this day. Before I start, do me a favor. Comment down below where you're listening to this from. Your bedroom at 2 a.m. with headphones on? Driving home from work? Kitchen while doing dishes? Doesn't matter. Just tell me. Because if this video disappears tomorrow, and there's a real chance it will, I need to know that somebody, somewhere, heard what I'm about to say. That at least one person out there knows the truth before they come for me. And trust me, they will come. They always do when someone breaks their silence about what really happened in the Nevada desert 23 years ago. My name is David Brenner. I'm 47 years old, and I live alone in a small cabin outside Flagstaff, Arizona. I don't have social media. I don't have many friends. I changed my phone number 4 times in the last decade. People who knew me before 2003 would tell you I used to be different. Outgoing, social, the kind of guy who'd organize barbecues and show up to church every Sunday with a smile on my face. That David Brenner died in a subterranean facility 4 kilometers below the desert floor. The man recording this, I'm just what's left. A shell walking around with a secret so big, so absolutely world-shattering, that I've spent over 2 decades looking over my shoulder, waiting for the knock on my door at 3 a.m. The knock that means they've decided I'm too much of a liability. You see this? I'm holding up my left wrist to the camera right now. There's a scar there, about 3 inches long, jagged and white against my skin. The official report says I cut it on a piece of broken equipment during a training exercise. That's what it says in my military discharge papers, filed under accidental injury, non-combat related. But that's a lie. I got this scar from something that should not exist according to everything we've been taught about biology, physics, and our place in the universe. I got this scar from a being that came from somewhere else. Somewhere so far away that the light from their sun takes thousands of years to reach Earth. And that being told me something about God, about Jesus Christ, about the second coming that the government has been hiding for decades. Now, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking this is just another conspiracy theory video, another crazy veteran looking for attention, another person trying to get views by making up stories about Area 51. Hell, I'd think the same thing if I were you. But here's what I need you to understand. I don't want attention. I spent 21 years hiding precisely because I didn't want anyone to notice me. I moved 6 times. I changed my name twice legally, 3 times unofficially. I got a job as a night security guard at a storage facility because it meant I could work alone, with no questions asked. The last thing I want is to be sitting here, in front of a camera, knowing that the moment I upload this, I'm putting a target on my back. So why am I doing this? Why now, after all these years of silence? Because something's changed. You've seen it too, even if you haven't connected the dots yet. The government is suddenly being transparent about UFOs, or UAPs as they call them now. The Pentagon is releasing videos. Military pilots are giving testimonies to Congress. Senators are holding hearings about recovered craft and non-human biologics. After 70 years of denial, ridicule, and cover-ups, they're suddenly admitting that, yes, these things are real. They're here. They've always been here. And if you think that's just because they suddenly decided to be honest with us, you're not paying attention. They're preparing us, slowly, carefully, because what's coming next is so big that they can't just spring it on humanity all at once. I signed documents when I left military service. Documents that said I'd spend a minimum of 25 years in a federal prison if I ever talked about what I saw in Sector S4 of the Groom Lake facility. That's if I was lucky. The guy who briefed me, a colonel whose name I'm still not going to say, made it very clear what would happen if I wasn't lucky. He said, "Sergeant Brenner, your mother still lives in Tulsa, right? Nice house, corner lot, those rose bushes she's so proud of. Be a real shame if something happened there. Fire, carbon monoxide leak, random break-in. Terrible things happen every day. That wasn't a hypothetical. That was a promise. Keep your mouth shut, or the people you love pay the price. But here's the thing about threats. They only work as long as you have something to lose. My mother passed away in 2019. Lung cancer. I never married, no kids, no siblings. The few friends I had before my discharge, they gave up on me years ago when I stopped returning calls and became, as one of them put it, a paranoid hermit living in the woods. So what leverage do they have over me now? My life. Brother, I stopped caring about that the moment I walked out of that chamber in 2001 and realized I could never unsee what I'd seen, never unhear what I'd heard. I've been a dead man walking for 23 years. All I'm doing now is making sure the truth comes out before they make it official. What I'm about to tell you over the next hour is going to challenge everything you believe. If you're an atheist, it's going to make you question that. If you're a Christian, it's going to expand your understanding of God in ways your pastor never prepared you for. If you're somewhere in between just trying to make sense of this weird existence we all share, buckle up, because the universe is so much stranger, so much bigger, and so much more filled with purpose than you ever imagined. And at the center of it all, holding it together, is exactly who the Bible said it was. Jesus Christ, the Son of God, the Lamb slain before the foundation of the world. Only the world he was slain for? It's not just Earth, it's everything, every galaxy, every planet, every conscious being that's ever looked up at the stars and wondered if they were alone. They're not alone. We're not alone. We never were. And the being that told me this, the being that died in my arms after passing on a message that the United States government has been suppressing since 1989, made me promise one thing. He said, when the time comes, when they start revealing the truth in pieces, you have to tell them everything. Don't let them control the narrative. Don't let them twist it into something that makes humanity lose faith. The Creator is real, His Son is real, and He's coming back for all of us. That time is now. The narrative is being controlled, and I'll be damned if I let them turn the greatest truth in the universe into another lie. So comment where you're watching from. Screenshot this video, download it, share it before it gets taken down. Because I'm about to tell you about the 10 minutes I spent alone with a dying extraterrestrial being who witnessed the crucifixion of Jesus Christ 2,000 years ago, and what he told me about the second coming will haunt you for the rest of your life, just like it's haunted me. Let's begin. I need to take you back to the beginning, to who I was before all of this. Before the facility, before the clearances, before I knew that everything I'd been taught about humanity's place in the universe was incomplete. I was born in Norman, Oklahoma in 1977. My father worked at the tire factory. My mother was a secretary at the local elementary school. We were the kind of family you'd see in a Norman Rockwell painting. Sunday dinners after church, Little League baseball in the summer, Christmas lights that went up the day after Thanksgiving. We attended First Baptist Church on Main Street, the one with the white steeple you could see from anywhere in town. I was baptized there when I was 12 years old, fully immersed in that cold water while the congregation sang Amazing Grace. I meant every word of that commitment. God wasn't just something we talked about on Sundays. He was woven into every part of our lives. My grandfather on my mother's side, William Crawford, was a decorated World War II veteran. He'd been at Normandy, survived the Battle of the Bulge, came home with a Purple Heart and a leather-bound King James Bible that had literally stopped shrapnel from hitting his heart. There's still a chunk of metal embedded in Deuteronomy, page 312. He used to let me hold that Bible when I was a kid, let me feel the weight of it, the torn pages, the dried blood still visible on the edges. He'd say, "David, God saved my life with this book. Not just my physical life, my soul too. Never forget that His word is a shield." When he passed away in 1994, my grandmother gave me that Bible. I kept it with me everywhere, and I mean everywhere, through high school, through my first job at the movie theater, and eventually into the United States Army. I enlisted in 1996, right after I turned 19. My reasons were probably the same as most kids from small-town Oklahoma. I wanted to see the world. I wanted to serve my country. And honestly, I didn't have the money for college. My parents were supportive but worried. Mom cried at the bus station when I left for basic training at Fort Benning, Georgia. Dad just shook my hand and said, "Make us proud, son." Basic training was exactly what you'd expect. Grueling, exhausting, designed to break you down and rebuild you into something that could follow orders without question. I excelled at it, not because I was naturally athletic or particularly smart, but because I could shut up and do what I was told. In the Army, that's half the battle. The other half is showing up on time and not causing problems. I was good at both. After infantry training, I got my first assignment. Germany, stationed at Ramstein Air Base. This was 1997, post-Cold War era, so it wasn't exactly a combat deployment. Mostly it was security rotations, training exercises, and dealing with the boredom of military life during peacetime. But I loved it. I got to see Europe, learned basic German, made friends with guys from all over the country. We'd go into town on weekends, drink beer that actually tasted like something, visit castles that were older than our entire nation. It was during this time that I really started reading my grandfather's Bible seriously, not just out of habit or obligation, but because I was genuinely curious. Here I was, surrounded by history, by cultures that had been Christian for 1,000 years longer than America existed, and I wanted to understand what had held all of this together, what made faith last across centuries. I started attending chapel services on base every Sunday, even though most guys my age skipped them. The chaplain, Captain Morris, was a good man. Former infantry himself, had served in Desert Storm, knew how to talk to soldiers without sounding preachy. We'd have coffee after services and talk about theology, about doubt, about how to reconcile a loving God with a world full of suffering. He never gave me easy answers, which I appreciated. He'd say, "David, faith isn't about having all the answers. It's about trusting that God does, even when we can't see the full picture." That statement would come back to haunt me years later, in ways Captain Morris could never have imagined, because the picture is so much bigger than any of us realized. So much bigger that it's almost incomprehensible. In 1998, I got transferred stateside to Fort Bragg, North Carolina, home of the 82nd Airborne and Special Operations Command. I wasn't Special Forces material, but I did get assigned to security details, which meant guarding sensitive facilities and personnel. This is where my record really started to shine. I had 3 years of spotless service, 0 disciplinary actions, commendations for attention to detail, and a security clearance that kept getting upgraded, because I never gave anyone a reason to doubt me. I didn't drink excessively, didn't get into bar fights, didn't chase women or gamble away my paycheck. Some guys called me boring. One sergeant joked that I was the most Eagle Scout soldier he'd ever met. But that reputation, that squeaky clean, dependable, quiet reputation, was exactly what made me valuable to certain people. Here's something most civilians don't understand about the military. There are layers to it. You've got your regular army, the one everyone sees in commercials and parades. Then you've got your special operations, the elite units that get more funding and cooler missions. But above all of that, invisible to 99% of service members, there's another layer, the black projects. The compartmentalized programs that don't officially exist, that operate with unlimited budgets and 0 oversight from anyone except a handful of generals and intelligence officials. These programs look for specific types of people. They don't want the loudest soldier or the most decorated war hero. They want ghosts. People who blend in, follow orders without asking questions, and most importantly, people who have nothing in their personal lives that could be used against them or that they might be tempted to run home to. By 1999, I fit that profile perfectly. My father had died of a heart attack in 1998. My mother was still alive, but we'd drifted apart. She'd remarried a guy I didn't particularly like, moved to Tulsa, started a new life. I was single, no girlfriend, no kids, no debts. My friends from high school had all moved on with their lives, marriages, careers, mortgages. When I came home on leave, I felt like a stranger in my own hometown. The Army had become my real family, and even there, I was more of a loner. I'd go to the gym, go to chapel, go to my bunk, read my grandfather's Bible, and repeat. Perfect, predictable, controllable. The kind of soldier who could disappear into a classified program and nobody would ask too many questions because there was nobody to ask them. I remember the day everything changed. March 15th, 1999. I was in my barracks room at Fort Bragg, polishing my boots and listening to a Casting Crowns CD on my Discman. Yes, we still used those back then, when there was a knock on my door. I opened it to find a full-bird colonel I'd never seen before, flanked by 2 MPs in dress uniforms. The colonel introduced himself, I'm not going to say his name even now, and asked if we could speak privately. My first thought was that I'd screwed up somehow, that I was in trouble, but his tone wasn't hostile. It was almost recruiting. He said, "Sergeant Brenner, your record has come to the attention of some people in the Department of Defense, people who run programs that require a very specific type of soldier. We'd like to discuss an opportunity with you, but it would require a level of commitment and discretion beyond anything you've experienced so far. Are you interested?" I should have asked more questions. I should have requested time to think about it, to call my mother, to pray on it. But I was 22 years old, eager to prove myself, and honestly, flattered that someone thought I was special enough for whatever this was. So I said yes. I said yes, without knowing that I was about to be transferred to a facility that officially didn't exist, to guard beings that officially weren't real, and to have a conversation that would destroy my faith and rebuild it into something so much larger and more terrifying than I ever thought possible. The colonel smiled, shook my hand, and said, "Pack light, Sergeant. Where you're going, you won't need much. And bring your Bible if you want. You might find comfort in it." At the time, I thought that was a nice gesture, an acknowledgement of my faith. Now I know it was a warning. They knew what I was about to see, and they knew I'd need every verse, every prayer, every ounce of faith I had to survive it. 3 weeks after that conversation in my barracks room, I received orders. Not through normal military channels, no posted assignment lists, no company formation announcements. Just a sealed envelope slipped under my door at 0500 hours on April 3, 1999. Inside was a single sheet of paper with instructions so brief they felt deliberately vague. Report to Hangar 7, Pope Army Airfield, 1800 hours. Bring 1 duffel bag, civilian clothes only. Tell no one. That last part was underlined twice in red ink. I read those 3 words over and over. Tell no one. Not my mother, not my friends, not even my commanding officer who I'd worked under for the past year. I was just supposed to disappear without explanation, like I'd never existed at all, and that's exactly what I did. I spent that day in a strange fog, going through the motions of normal duties while knowing everything was about to change. I packed my duffel bag that afternoon, 3 changes of clothes, toiletries, my grandfather's Bible wrapped in a t-shirt to protect it, and a photograph of my parents on their wedding day. That photo is one of the few things I still have from before. Everything else got lost or left behind over the years, but I kept that picture. My dad in his rented tuxedo looking nervous, my mom in her white dress looking radiant, both of them so young and full of hope. I remember staring at that photo for a long time before I packed it, wondering if I'd ever see my mom again, if I'd ever get married like they did, if I'd have kids who'd look at my wedding photo someday. Funny how your mind goes to those places when you know you're walking towards something dangerous. Pope Army Airfield is right next to Fort Bragg, so I didn't have far to go. I walked there in civilian clothes, jeans, a plain gray t-shirt, work boots, carrying my duffel over my shoulder like I was just another soldier heading home on leave. Hangar 7 was at the far end of the airfield, one of the older buildings that looked like it hadn't been updated since Vietnam. There were no markings on it, no signs, no vehicles parked outside. Just a single door with a keypad lock and a security camera pointed at whoever approached. I stood there for a moment, hand hovering over the keypad, realizing this was my last chance to turn around. I could walk away right now, go back to my barracks, claim I never got the orders, and return to my normal, boring life of security rotations and Sunday chapel services. But I didn't. I punched in the code that had been written at the bottom of the instruction sheet, and the door clicked open. Inside, the hangar was empty except for a C-130 Hercules transport plane with its rear ramp down and engines already running. There were 5 other soldiers standing near the ramp, all around my age, all looking just as confused as I felt. None of them were in uniform either. A man in a black suit, not military, definitely intelligence of some kind, checked our names off a clipboard and gestured for us to board without a word of explanation. No briefing, no welcome speech, nothing. We climbed into the cargo bay and sat on the webbed seats that lined the walls. The interior of the plane had been modified. All the windows were covered with metal plates, bolted from the inside. We couldn't see out, couldn't see where we were going or what direction we were flying. The ramp closed, sealing us in with the deafening roar of the engines, and then we were airborne. The flight lasted 4 hours, give or take. It's hard to judge time accurately when you're sitting in a windowless metal tube with nothing to do but think. None of us talked. Every time someone tried to start a conversation, one of the 2 armed guards sitting near the cockpit would shake his head. So we sat in silence, each of us alone with our thoughts and whatever fears we'd brought on board. I kept my hand on my duffel bag, feeling the shape of my grandfather's Bible through the canvas, and I prayed. Not eloquent prayers. Not the kind you'd hear in church, just desperate, repetitive pleas. God, please let this be okay. Please let me be doing the right thing. Please protect me. Please don't let me die in some secret facility without anyone knowing what happened to me. Over and over, until the words lost meaning and became just sounds in my head, a rhythm to keep the panic at bay. When we finally landed, the ramp dropped, and we were hit with a wall of desert heat. It was twilight. The sky that deep purple-orange you only get in the southwest, and we were in the middle of absolutely nowhere. No buildings visible, no roads, just flat scrubland stretching to distant mountains. 3 black SUVs with tinted windows were waiting on the tarmac. The man in the suit from earlier reappeared and divided us into groups. I ended up in the second vehicle with 2 other soldiers, a woman named Torres and a guy named Mitchell, neither of whom I'd ever see again after that night. We drove for another 40 minutes on an unpaved road that seemed to go in circles, deliberately confusing us so we couldn't track direction or distance. Classic security protocol. Make sure nobody knows exactly where they are. Eventually, we arrived at a guardhouse that looked like it belonged to a medium-security corporate campus. Chain-link fence, boom gate, bored-looking guards in unmarked uniforms. But behind that guardhouse was another fence, and behind that was another, each one with more cameras, more sensors, more serious-looking security. We went through 3 separate checkpoints before we finally stopped at a low concrete building that was half buried in the desert floor. This was Groom Lake, Area 51. The place that officially didn't exist, that the government had denied for decades, that conspiracy theorists had been screaming about since the 1950s. And here I was, 22 years old with a Bible in my duffel bag, about to walk through its front door. They took us into a briefing room that looked like every other military briefing room I'd ever been in. Fluorescent lights, folding chairs, a projector screen at the front, that particular smell of industrial cleaner and stale coffee. There were maybe 30 soldiers in total now, all recruited the same way I'd been, all young, all with spotless records, all probably wondering what the hell they'd signed up for. A colonel walked in, not the same one who'd recruited me, someone new with more ribbons on his chest and considerably less warmth in his eyes. He stood at the front of the room and said, "Gentlemen, ladies, welcome to a facility that does not exist. You are about to be read into a program that is classified at levels beyond top secret. What you will see here, what you will do here, cannot be discussed with anyone outside this facility. Not your families, not your friends, not your chaplains, not your therapists, if you end up needing one, and you will. Some of you won't make it through training. Some of you will request transfer within the first month. That's fine. We only want people who can handle this." Then came the NDAs. Non-disclosure agreements. Except these weren't the standard military paperwork about keeping operational details quiet. These were 30-page legal documents full of language about severe criminal penalties, federal prosecution, and consequences that went far beyond prison time. They laid it out very clearly. If you ever speak about what you see in this facility, you will be charged under the Espionage Act. Minimum sentence, 25 years in federal prison. Maximum sentence, life without parole. And that's if you're lucky if they decide to go through official channels. The colonel let that sink in, then continued. But let's be honest, most breaches of this nature don't make it to trial. They get handled quietly, internally, in ways that ensure the problem disappears permanently. So before you sign, understand what you're agreeing to. This isn't just your career on the line. It's your life, and potentially the lives of anyone you might be tempted to tell. He paused, looked directly at me, then at each soldier in turn. Then he said something I'll never forget. "We know everything about you. We know where your families live, what cars they drive, what schools your little brothers and sisters attend. Sergeant Brenner, your mother lives at 4782 Maple Drive in Tulsa, doesn't she? Nice house, corner lot, those rose bushes she planted last spring. It would be a real shame if something happened there. House fire, gas leak, random home invasion. Terrible things happen every day in America." He wasn't hypothesizing. He wasn't making a general point. He was telling me, directly, that my mother's life was collateral, that if I ever broke silence, she would pay the price. I felt my stomach drop, felt cold sweat break out on my forehead. This wasn't the military I'd joined. This was something else entirely. Something that operated outside the rules, outside morality, outside everything I thought my country stood for. But I signed. We all signed. Because what choice did we have? We were already there. Already inside the fence, already witnesses to the fact that this place existed. The only way out was through, and the only way to survive was to obey. After the NDAs were collected, they took us down, and I mean down. We boarded an industrial elevator that looked like it belonged in a mine shaft. Exposed cables, bare metal walls, a floor that clanged under our boots. The descent took 11 minutes. I counted every second, watching the depth indicator climb. 500 meters. 1,000 meters, 1,500 meters. We were going nearly 4 kilometers below the surface, deeper than most subway systems, deeper than any basement or bunker I'd ever heard of. The air pressure changed. My ears popped repeatedly, and I started to feel a low-frequency hum in my bones, like standing too close to massive generators or transformers. When the elevator finally stopped and the doors opened, we stepped out into a corridor that stretched impossibly far in both directions, illuminated by harsh LED lights that made everything look washed out and surreal. The walls were smooth concrete, the floor was polished to a shine, and there were doors every 50 feet, each one marked with nothing but a number and a biometric scanner. This was Sector S4, the deepest, most classified section of a facility that wasn't supposed to exist. And somewhere down here, in one of these rooms behind one of these locked doors, was something that would change my understanding of God, the universe, and everything I thought I knew about humanity's place in creation. I just didn't know it yet. The first thing that hits you when you step into Sector S4 is the cold. Not regular air conditioning cold, but the kind of cold you feel in your bones, the kind that makes you think you're in a morgue or a meat locker. They kept the entire facility at a constant 52 degrees Fahrenheit, something about optimal preservation conditions for biological specimens. Within a week, every soldier down there had permanently chapped lips and bought thermal undershirts from the commissary. But it wasn't just the temperature that got to you. It was the smell. Antiseptic, ozone, and something else underneath. Something organic and wrong that the ventilation systems could never quite scrub out. It smelled like formaldehyde mixed with copper, like a hospital mixed with a slaughterhouse. You learned to breathe through your mouth after a while, but that first day, that first hour, I had to fight not to gag. The orientation briefing lasted 6 hours. They walked us through the layout of S4, showed us maps that looked like something out of a science fiction movie. The facility was divided into 7 levels, each one deeper than the last, each one more classified than the one above it. Level 1 was administration and support services, cafeteria, sleeping quarters, medical bay, the boring stuff that kept the place running. Level 2 was research laboratories for reverse engineering recovered technology. You know, the crashed UFO stuff everyone jokes about. Turns out the jokes were based on truth. Level 3 was materials analysis and propulsion systems. Level 4 was weapons development. Level 5 was communications and signal intelligence, trying to decode transmissions from God knows where. And then there was Level 6, where I would be stationed. They called it biological containment and analysis, the place where they kept the things that were alive, or had been alive, or were something in between that didn't fit our definitions. Level 7 existed, but they didn't tell us what was down there. The briefing officer, a major with dead eyes and a voice like gravel, just said, "Level 7 is not your concern. You don't have clearance for Level 7. You will never have clearance for Level 7. If you somehow end up near the elevator to Level 7, turn around and forget you saw it." That, of course, made everyone desperate to know what was on Level 7, but we never found out. In my 2 years there, I saw exactly 3 people with Level 7 badges, 2 scientists and a general whose name I never learned. They looked like they hadn't slept in months. Whatever was down there, it was bad enough that even the people who worked with alien corpses and recovered spacecraft wanted nothing to do with it. My assignment was clear. I would be part of a rotating security detail on Level 6, guarding the containment cells and ensuring that whatever was inside stayed inside. There were 12 containment cells in total, arranged in a circular pattern around a central observation hub. Each cell was a self-contained biosphere with its own atmosphere, temperature control, and fail-safe protocols. The walls were 18 inches of reinforced steel and polymer composite, designed to withstand everything from physical force to directed energy weapons. Each door had 3 separate locking mechanisms, biometric, keypad, and a manual deadbolt that required 2 people with different security clearances to open. The message was clear. These things are dangerous, and if they ever get out, we're all dead. On my second day, I met the 2 people who would define my experience in S4. The first was Dr. Sarah Chen, a molecular biologist from Stanford, who'd been recruited into the program straight out of her postdoctoral fellowship. She was maybe 30 years old, Chinese-American, with wire-rimmed glasses and this perpetually exhausted look that I'd later learn was standard for everyone who worked with the specimens. Sarah was brilliant, the kind of person who could explain complex genetic sequencing in terms a grunt like me could understand. But more than that, she was kind. In a place where most scientists treated security personnel like furniture, Sarah actually learned our names, asked how we were doing, brought coffee to the night shift. She told me once, during a quiet moment in the observation hub, that she'd grown up Catholic, that her parents still prayed for her every night, even though they had no idea where she worked or what she did. "They think I'm doing cancer research at Los Alamos," she said with a sad smile. "I wish that's all this was." The second person was Colonel Richard Mitchell, the commanding officer of all security operations in S4. Mitchell was old-school military, Marine Corps infantry, multiple combat deployments, the kind of officer who'd earned his rank through blood and competence rather than politics. He was in his mid-50s, built like a bulldog, with gray hair cut high and tight, and a scar running from his left eye to his jaw. Rumor was he got that scar from Specimen 4 during a containment breach in 1996, back before they'd perfected the cell designs. Mitchell didn't talk about it, but every time he walked past Cell 4, his hand would unconsciously drift to that scar. He ran security with absolute precision. Everything had protocols. Everything had redundancies. And if you deviated from procedure by even a single step, you'd find yourself reassigned to counting paperclips on level 1. But he was also fair. He never asked us to do anything he wouldn't do himself, and he made it clear that our job wasn't to understand the science. Our job was to keep everyone alive. The briefing about the specimens happened on my third day. Mitchell gathered all 12 of us security personnel in the observation hub, had Sarah pull up files on the main screen, and walked us through what we were actually guarding. "There are 12 entities currently housed in this facility," he began, his voice echoing slightly in the circular room. "They were recovered between 1947 and 1997 from various crash sites and contact events across North America. We don't call them aliens. That term is too loaded, too tied up with science fiction nonsense. We call them non-human biological entities, or NHBEs. Each one is different physiology, different behavior patterns, different levels of threat. Some of them are deceased specimens, essentially corpses we're studying. Others are in a state of biological stasis that we don't fully understand. And a very few, are conscious and aware. The screen showed images that I still see when I close my eyes. Specimen 1, the classic gray alien from Roswell, about 4 feet tall, preserved in some kind of gel that kept the tissues from degrading. Specimen 2, something insectoid, all angles and chitin, mercifully dead. Specimen 3, a humanoid figure over 7 feet tall with elongated limbs and skin that seemed to shimmer between colors. Specimens 4 through 6 were variations on themes I couldn't quite process, body plans that didn't make biological sense, configurations of limbs and organs that seemed designed for environments nothing like Earth. But then Sarah clicked to the next slide, and the entire room went quiet. Specimen 7. The image showed a being that was almost human, bipedal, proportionate, with features that were recognizable even though they were clearly not of this world. Gray-blue skin, large dark eyes, a face that managed to be both alien and somehow familiar. Sarah's voice was soft when she spoke. Specimen 7 is unique. It was recovered alive in 1989 from a site near Socorro, New Mexico. It has survived in containment longer than any other conscious NHBE we've ever housed. And unlike the others, it appears to be actively trying to communicate. That's when Mitchell laid down the most important rule, the one that overrode every other protocol and procedure. "Listen carefully," he said, making eye contact with each of us. "You will see these entities through observation windows. You will monitor them via camera feeds. You will enter their cells for maintenance and medical procedures when absolutely necessary. But under no circumstances, and I mean zero, none, never, do you make direct eye contact with them, especially Specimen 7. He let that hang in the air for a moment. "The ones that are conscious, they have abilities we don't fully understand. Direct eye contact seems to create some kind of neural connection, some form of communication or influence that bypasses normal cognition. 4 guards before you failed to follow this rule. 2 of them are currently in psychiatric facilities, unable to form coherent sentences. 1 committed suicide. The 4th just stopped eating, stopped speaking, stopped everything. He died 3 weeks later, and the autopsy showed no physical cause. So I'll say it again. Do not look them in the eyes." We spent the next 2 hours going over emergency protocols, containment breach procedures, and what to do if a specimen became aggressive. But my mind kept returning to that image of Specimen 7. There was something in those eyes in the photograph, something that didn't look mindless or predatory like the others. It looked sad, like it was trapped and knew it, like it was waiting for something. Sarah must have noticed me staring at the screen because after the briefing she pulled me aside. "You're going to be assigned to Cell 7, she said quietly. "Mitchell specifically requested you for it. I don't know why, but I'm going to give you some advice. That thing in there is not like the others. It's old, David. We've done tissue analysis, carbon dating, genetic sequencing. If our data is correct, Specimen 7 is over 4,000 years old, and it's been watching humanity for most of that time. So when you stand guard outside that cell, when you see it through the observation window, remember that it knows more about us than we'll ever know about it. And whatever you do, don't let it catch you looking." I nodded, my throat too tight to speak. 4,000 years old, watching humanity. What the hell had I gotten myself into? My first shift started at 2200 hours, 10 p.m. for civilians. That's military time for the overnight watch, the quietest and loneliest hours in any facility, but especially in one buried 4 kilometers underground where day and night have no meaning. Mitchell walked me to Cell 7 personally, which should have told me something right there. Commanding officers don't usually escort privates to their posts unless something unusual is going on. We walked in silence down the circular corridor, our boots echoing on the polished floor, past cells 1 through 6 with their various occupants that I tried not to look at too closely. When we reached Cell 7, Mitchell stopped and put his hand on my shoulder. "Brenner," he said, his voice lower than usual. "I'm assigning you here specifically because of your record. You follow orders. You don't ask unnecessary questions, and you're a man of faith." He glanced at the small silver crucifix hanging around my neck, the one I'd worn since my baptism, tucked under my shirt. "Keep that faith close. You're going to need it with this one." He keyed in the code to the observation room, a small chamber about 10 feet by 10 feet with one wall made entirely of reinforced ballistic glass looking into the containment cell. There was a desk with monitors showing various camera angles, a logbook for recording observations, and a single chair that had clearly seen better days. The observation glass had a strange quality to it. It was perfectly clear, but there was a faint shimmer to it, like heat waves rising off summer asphalt. "One-way transparency," Mitchell explained. "You can see in, but the specimen can't see out. Theoretically." That word, theoretically, hung in the air like a threat. "Your job is simple. Watch. Record any changes in behavior, any vocalizations, any movement patterns that seem unusual. If the specimen approaches the glass and stays there for more than 30 seconds, you call it in. If it shows signs of distress or aggression, you hit the panic button. And for the love of God, remember what I said about eye contact." Mitchell left, and I was alone. I sat down in that worn chair, and for a long moment, I didn't look through the glass. I could hear my own heartbeat in my ears, feel the cold sweat starting on my palms despite the freezing temperature. I checked the monitors first, 6 different camera angles of the cell interior. The cell itself was larger than I expected, maybe 30 feet by 30 feet, with white walls that had a slightly organic texture to them, like they were made of something that could breathe or flex. There was minimal furniture, a platform that might have been a bed, a depression in the floor that could have been for waste, and some geometric shapes whose purpose I couldn't determine. And in the center of the cell, sitting perfectly still on the floor in what looked like a meditation pose, was Specimen 7. I forced myself to look through the observation glass directly. And Jesus Christ, and I mean that literally, because his name was the first thing that came to my mind. What I saw made my breath catch in my throat. The creature was tall, maybe 6'3" if it stood up, with a build that was humanoid but elongated, like someone had taken a human skeleton and stretched it by 20%. Its skin was a gray-blue color, the shade of a winter sky just before a storm, and it had a texture that seemed to shift between smooth and slightly scaled, depending on how the light hit it. The head was proportionally larger than a human's, with a cranium that swept back in a way that suggested a massive brain capacity. But it was the face that got me, because despite all the alien features, despite the obvious non-human biology, there was something in that face that read as a face. Not a mask, not an insectoid nightmare. A face with intent, with personality, with something I can only describe as soul. The eyes were the worst and the best part. Large, much larger than human eyes, and completely black at first glance. No visible whites, no pupils, just darkness. But as I watched, as my own eyes adjusted to really seeing what I was looking at, I realized there was depth to them, layers, like looking into deep water where you can't quite see the bottom but you know something ancient is down there. And here's the thing that made my skin crawl. The creature wasn't looking at the walls or the floor or off into space like I'd expected. It was looking directly at me, or rather, directly at my chest, directly at where my crucifix was hanging under my uniform shirt. I know Mitchell said the glass was one way, that the specimen theoretically couldn't see out, but this thing was staring at the exact spot where my grandfather's cross hung against my skin, and it had been doing that from the moment I sat down. I grabbed my crucifix through my shirt without thinking, and I swear to you, I swear on that same Bible my grandfather carried through World War II, the creature's head tilted slightly, just a few degrees, the way a curious dog might cock its head when it hears a strange sound. It had seen me move. It knew I was there. The one-way glass was a lie, or it didn't matter to whatever senses this thing possessed. My hand was shaking as I picked up the logbook and tried to write the standard entry. 22:05 hours. Specimen 7 observed in resting position. No aggressive behavior noted, but my handwriting was chicken scratch, barely legible, because my hands wouldn't stop trembling. Not from fear. That's what's so strange. I wasn't afraid in the way you'd expect. I felt something else. Something I didn't have a name for yet. About 20 minutes into my shift, the guard from the previous watch stopped by for the handoff briefing. A guy named Rodriguez, who'd been on Cell 7 duty for 3 months. He leaned against the doorframe and watched me watching the specimen, a knowing look on his face. "He's looking at your cross, isn't he?" Rodriguez said it as a statement, not a question. I nodded, not trusting my voice. Rodriguez sighed. "Yeah, he does that. With anyone who wears one. We had a guy last month, Mormon, wore a CTR ring. Choose the right, you know. Specimen 7 stared at that ring for the entire 8-hour shift. When the guy took it off to wash his hands, Specimen 7 just looked away, looked at the wall. But the second he put it back on, eyes right back on it. I asked Rodriguez why, what it meant. He shrugged. Doc Chen has theories. Mitchell has theories. Me? I just know this one's different from the others. You'll see what I mean. I spent the next hour just observing, trying to be professional, trying to do my job. But it's hard to maintain objectivity when you're watching something that shouldn't exist. The creature didn't move much, just small adjustments in posture every 10 or 15 minutes, a shift of weight, a slight turn of the head. But every movement was deliberate, precise, almost ritualistic. At one point it raised its hands, 3 long fingers and an opposable thumb on each hand, and held them in front of its chest in a position that looked disturbingly like prayer. It stayed like that for over 30 minutes, completely motionless, while I sat there with my heart hammering, watching something from another world, pray to, what? Its own God, the same God I prayed to. The thought was too big, too strange, and I pushed it away. Around midnight, Rodriguez came back with coffee. Terrible instant coffee, but caffeinated, which was what mattered. We stood in the observation room together, both of us staring through the glass. "Mitchell told you this thing is over 4,000 years old, right?" Rodriguez said quietly. I nodded. "You believe it?" I said I didn't know what to believe anymore. Rodriguez took a long sip of coffee. "I've been stationed here for 8 months. I've seen the other specimens. Some of them are scary. Specimen 4 will straight up try to kill you if you get too close. Specimen 9 emits some kind of psychic scream that gives you nosebleeds. But this one, Specimen 7, it's not scary. It's sad. Like it's been waiting for something for a really long time and it's starting to lose hope." He paused. "And here's the weird part. Every guard who works this cell, eventually they all say the same thing. They say it feels like being in church, like standing in front of something holy." I didn't respond because I didn't want to admit he was right, but he was. The longer I sat there, the more I felt it. That same sensation I'd get during Sunday services when I was a kid, during communion, during moments of genuine worship when you forget about the people around you and you're just present with something bigger than yourself. I'd come into this facility expecting to guard a prisoner, some dangerous alien creature that needed to be contained. But what I found myself feeling was reverence. The kind of reverence you're supposed to feel in the presence of something ancient, something that has seen things you can't imagine, something that carries weight beyond the physical. Specimen 7 wasn't looking at me with hostility or hunger or mindless alien intention. It was looking at me, at my cross, the way a scholar might look at a text they'd been studying for centuries, with recognition, with understanding. with something that felt disturbingly like compassion. My first shift ended at 600 hours. 8 hours of watching, recording, and trying to process what I was experiencing. When my replacement arrived, a quiet guy named Patterson who nodded at me but didn't say much, I walked back to my quarters in a daze. I didn't go to the cafeteria, didn't check in with anyone, just went straight to my bunk, pulled out my grandfather's Bible, and opened it at random. My hands were still shaking. The page fell open to Isaiah 6:2. Above him were seraphim, each with 6 wings. With 2 wings they covered their faces, with 2 they covered their feet, and with 2 they were flying, angels, beings from beyond earth, serving God, witnessing His glory. I'd always pictured them as humans with wings, the way they looked in paintings and Christmas cards. But what if I'd been thinking too small? What if the universe was full of God's creatures, His witnesses, His servants, and we'd just been too limited in our imagination to understand? I lay there on my bunk, clutching that Bible, staring at the concrete ceiling 4 kilometers below the Nevada desert, and I realized something had fundamentally changed in me. I'd looked at Specimen 7 for 8 hours, and somehow, despite every warning, despite every protocol, that creature had looked back into me, and whatever I'd seen in those black eyes, whatever ancient presence resided in that gray-blue body, it knew something I didn't. Something about God, about creation, about why we're all here. And for the first time in my life, I was terrified that faith alone wasn't going to be enough to handle the truth. The next 2 years of my life fell into a rhythm that most people would find unbearable, monotonous, isolated, and psychologically draining in ways that are hard to explain. My schedule was simple: 3 8-hour shifts per week on Cell 7, interspersed with mandatory physical training, weapons qualifications, and the kind of busy work the military invents to keep soldiers occupied. I lived in a 10 by 12 room with a bed, a desk, and a footlocker. No windows, obviously, since we were 4 kilometers underground. No internet, no phone calls home, no connection to the outside world except for heavily censored mail that took 3 weeks to arrive and 3 weeks to send. Every 30 days, we got 72 hours of surface leave. They'd bus us to Las Vegas in unmarked vehicles, give us civilian clothes and cash, and tell us to blow off steam. Most guys hit the casinos and strip clubs. I went to chapel services at different churches, sat in the back pew, and tried to remember what normal life felt like. But the routine I'm really talking about is the routine with Specimen 7. 3 times a week, 2200 to 0600 hours, I sat in that observation room and watched. That's all it was supposed to be, watching, recording behavior patterns, noting any changes, maintaining security protocols. There was no interaction allowed, no communication, no engagement whatsoever. The specimen was an object of study, not a conversation partner. Mitchell drilled that into us constantly. These things are not people. They may look humanoid, they may show behaviors that seem familiar, but they are fundamentally other. Do not anthropomorphize. Do not project human emotions onto them. Do not, under any circumstances, think of them as anything other than potential threats contained in a very expensive cage. Good advice, I suppose. Advice I failed to follow completely. Because here's what Mitchell's briefing didn't prepare me for. Specimen 7 never acted like a threat. The other specimens, the ones in cells 1 through 6, they fit the narrative. Specimen 4 would throw itself against the walls during certain lunar phases, leaving cracks in reinforced concrete that required constant repair. Specimen 9 would emit that psychic scream Rodriguez mentioned, a sound that didn't travel through air but somehow resonated directly in your skull, giving you instant migraines and nosebleeds if you got too close. Specimen 2, the insectoid one, had actually killed a researcher in 1994 by injecting some kind of paralytic venom during a medical procedure. These things were dangerous, but Specimen 7, in 2 years, I never saw it display a single act of aggression. No attempts to breach containment, no hostile gestures, no threatening behavior towards staff. It just existed, waited, watched. About 6 months into my assignment, I started noticing something strange. The walls of Cell 7 had that organic texture I mentioned, like living tissue, and they were designed to be self-cleaning. Any biological waste or residue would be absorbed and processed by the material. But Specimen 7 had figured out how to mark them anyway. Using what, I never determined. Maybe some secretion from its skin, maybe just pressure applied in precise ways, but it was drawing symbols. Geometric patterns mostly, that appeared and disappeared in slow cycles as the walls processed them. Dr. Chen started photographing them, trying to determine if they were language, art, or just random marks. Most of them meant nothing to me. Alien mathematics or alien doodling, who knows. But then one day, during a routine observation, I saw one that made my blood run cold. It was simple. 2 curved lines forming a fish shape with a cross inside. The ichthys, the symbol early Christians used in the Roman Empire to identify each other when being Christian could get you killed. I'd seen it 1,000 times, on bumper stickers, church bulletins, jewelry. My grandmother had an ichthys pin she wore every Sunday, and here it was, drawn on the wall of an alien containment cell by a creature that supposedly had no concept of human religion. I stared at it for a solid 5 minutes, my mind refusing to process what I was seeing. Then I grabbed the logbook and wrote, with a shaking hand, 0247 hours. Specimen 7 has marked cell wall with symbol resembling Christian fish. Recommend Dr. Chen review footage. I hit the call button. Sarah was there in 10 minutes, still in her pajamas, glasses crooked on her face. She stood next to me, looking through the observation glass at that symbol, and I watched all the color drain from her face. He's done this before, she said quietly. 3 years ago, with a different guard who wore a rosary, drew the fish, drew a cross, drew what looked like a chalice. We documented it, ran it up the chain of command, and got told to classify it level 7 and never speak of it again. She turned to look at me, and there was something in her eyes, fear mixed with wonder. David, I'm going to tell you something that could get me court-martialed. We've been trying to communicate with Specimen 7 for 12 years. Linguists, cryptographers, telepaths. Yes, we have actual telepaths on staff. That's a whole other nightmare. Nothing worked. But about 5 years ago, someone noticed a pattern. The specimen only responds to people of faith. Not any specific faith necessarily, but people who genuinely believe in something beyond the material world. We tested it systematically, brought in atheists, agnostics, secular humanists. 0 response. But Catholics, Protestants, Muslims, Hindus, even a Buddhist monk we flew in from Tibet. The specimen acknowledged all of them. I asked her what she meant by acknowledged. Sarah pulled up footage on her tablet, showing me clips I'd never seen. Different guards, different years, all standing in the same spot I stood every night. And in each clip, Specimen 7 was doing the same thing, positioning itself to face them, making those prayer-like gestures with its hands, drawing symbols that corresponded to their faiths. A crescent moon for a Muslim god, symbol for the Hindu researcher, a lotus flower for the Buddhist monk. We don't understand it, Sarah continued. Our working theory is that the specimen perceives or senses something about consciousness that correlates with religious belief. Maybe it's quantum entanglement of neural patterns. Maybe it's something we don't have physics for yet. But here's what really keeps me up at night, David. Every single person who spent significant time observing Specimen 7, everyone who's felt that weird church-like feeling you're not going to admit but I know you've felt, they all report the same thing eventually. They say it's not trying to mock our faiths or study them. They say it feels like recognition, like this thing has seen our religions before, like it knows something about God that we don't. That conversation changed everything. Suddenly my shifts weren't just about security. They were about trying to understand what this creature knew, what it was trying to communicate. I started paying closer attention to patterns. The symbols appeared in sequences, always temporary, always cycling. The prayer postures happened at specific times. I started logging them and realized they corresponded to dawn and dusk on the surface, times when I would normally pray if I were living a regular life. And the way Specimen 7 positioned itself, always oriented toward my crucifix, always maintaining what felt like respectful distance. It wasn't the behavior of a prisoner plotting escape. It was the behavior of someone waiting for permission to speak. Someone who had a message but had been told, or had decided, to wait until the right listener came along. I started doing something I never told anyone about, something that violated every protocol I'd been taught. Before each shift, while I was still in my quarters getting ready, I would pray. Not the casual, rote prayers I'd been doing since childhood. Real prayers. Desperate prayers. God, if this creature knows something about you, if it's been a witness to your work, please help me understand. Please show me what I'm supposed to see here. Please don't let me be losing my mind. And then, when I sat down in that observation room, I would sometimes, Just sometimes, when I was sure no one was watching, I would take out my grandfather's Bible and read passages aloud, quietly, under my breath, but loud enough that if this thing could hear through 18 inches of reinforced composite, it would know what I was reading, and I swear it responded. Not in any way I could prove or document officially, but in ways I felt in my bones. When I read from the Psalms, Specimen 7 would settle into that meditation pose and stay perfectly still, like it was listening. When I read from the Gospels, the words of Jesus himself, the creature would move closer to the glass, would press one long-fingered hand against the barrier on its side, and I could feel something. Not telepathy exactly, but a presence, a attention, like standing in a room where someone is staring at the back of your head. That prickle of awareness that you're being observed by something conscious and intentional. Other guards started noticing I was different. Patterson mentioned that I seemed calmer around Cell 7 than anywhere else in the facility. Rodriguez joked that I'd been brainwashed by alien vibes. Mitchell pulled me aside once and asked point blank if I was experiencing any psychological distress, any unusual thoughts, any compulsions. I lied and said no. Because how do you explain to your commanding officer that you're developing what feels like a spiritual connection to an extraterrestrial being? How do you say that out loud without sounding completely insane? 2 years. 730 days of routine, of watching, of slowly having your understanding of reality fundamentally restructured. I celebrated my 24th birthday in that underground facility with a cupcake from the commissary and a card my mother sent that arrived 3 weeks late. I spent Christmas of 2000 on shift, sitting in the observation room while Specimen 7 drew what looked unmistakably like a star, the Star of Bethlehem, I realized later, on the cell wall. I watched the new millennium arrive on a security monitor, saw the fireworks over Las Vegas in the distance during one of my surface leaves, and thought about how humanity was celebrating a date that marked 2,000 years since Christ's birth. And the whole time, 4 kilometers below the Nevada desert, there was a being in a cell who had supposedly been alive for twice that long, who had maybe, probably, actually been there, who had witnessed things that every Christian on earth would give anything to have seen. By March of 2001, I wasn't the same person who'd signed those NDAs 2 years earlier. I was thinner. The constant cold and stress had burned off any extra weight. I was quieter. Most of my conversations with other soldiers had dwindled to purely functional exchanges, and I was certain, with a certainty that bordered on religious conviction, that Specimen 7 was not a prisoner or a specimen or a threat. It was a witness, a messenger maybe, something that had been waiting in that cell for 12 years, watching guards come and go, drawing symbols that 99% of them wouldn't understand, practicing patience that only something ancient could possess, waiting for someone who would listen, someone who would believe. And then, on March 15, 2001, at 03:17 hours, everything changed. The alarms went off. Specimen 7 was dying, and it had asked, specifically, to speak with me. The alarm ripped me out of sleep at exactly 03:17 hours, 3:17 a.m., not the standard facility alarm, which was a steady beep you'd hear for fire drills or minor emergencies. This was the red alert klaxon, the sound that meant containment breach or imminent catastrophic failure. A sound designed to trigger your fight-or-flight response so violently that you're out of bed and moving before your conscious mind catches up. I hit the floor in my underwear, heart already hammering, muscle memory from 2 years of drills taking over. Pull on pants, pull on boots, grab security badge, go. The hallway outside my quarters was chaos. Soldiers running in both directions, scientists in lab coats sprinting toward the elevators, someone shouting coordinates and cell numbers over the intercom. The emergency lighting had kicked on, bathing everything in that sickly red glow that makes everyone look like extras in a horror movie. I grabbed the nearest person I recognized, Patterson, my fellow Cell 7 guard, and shouted over the noise, "What cell? Which one breached?" He looked at me with eyes that were too wide, too white in the red lighting. "It's yours," he said. "Cell 7, but it's not a breach. It's dying, Brenner. The thing is dying." He didn't wait for my response, just kept running toward his emergency station. I stood there for maybe 2 seconds, processing what he'd said, and then I was running too, running toward level 6, toward the containment area, toward Cell 7. The elevator seemed to take forever, even though it was probably only 45 seconds. I shared the ride down with a medical team, 3 people in white coats carrying equipment I didn't recognize. their faces grim and focused. Nobody spoke. The only sound was our breathing and the hydraulic hum of the elevator descending deeper into the facility. When the doors opened on level 6, I was hit with a wall of sound and activity. The observation hub was packed with personnel, at least 20 people crowded around monitors, talking over each other, voices sharp with urgency and something else. Fear, maybe, or awe. I pushed my way through to the front and saw Dr. Ari. Sarah Chen standing at the main console, her hands flying over the controls, pulling up readouts and vital signs that looked more like seismograph data than anything biological. Her hair was a mess, her glasses were sliding down her nose, and she was crying. Actually crying. Tears running down her cheeks while she worked. I'd never seen Sarah lose her composure in 2 years. Not during containment drills, not during the incident when Specimen 4 nearly killed a maintenance worker. But now she was crying and not even trying to hide it. "Sarah," I said, touching her shoulder. She spun around, and when she saw me, something in her face crumpled with relief. "David. Oh, thank God, David, you're here." She grabbed my arm with a grip that was going to leave bruises. "It's Specimen 7. Something's failing. We don't know what, exactly, because his biology is so different from anything we understand. But all his vital signs are crashing simultaneously. Cellular cohesion is breaking down. It's like his body is forgetting how to be solid. We've been monitoring him for 12 years, and his physiology has been stable the entire time, and then 20 minutes ago, everything just started cascading. We're losing him." I looked past her at the observation screen showing the interior of Cell 7, and what I saw made my stomach drop. Specimen 7 was no longer in that calm meditation pose I'd seen hundreds of times. It was on the floor, curled on its side, and its skin was doing something wrong. Flickering, almost, like a bad television signal, shifting between solid matter and something that looked almost translucent. But here's what made this worse than just watching something die. Here's what made Sarah grip my arm like I was the last solid thing in a collapsing world. "David, he's asking for you." My brain stalled. "What?" Sarah pulled up an audio feed, and I heard it, not through the speakers exactly, but somehow inside my head, the same way you hear your own thoughts. A voice that wasn't a voice, words that weren't quite in English, but I understood them anyway. "Brenna, David Brenna, the one with the cross, the one who listens. Please, before it's too late." The voice was weak, fading in and out like a radio signal from very far away, but it was clearly directed at me. Specimen 7, in whatever way it communicated, had specifically asked for me by name. Colonel Mitchell appeared from somewhere in the crowd, looking like he'd aged 10 years in the last 20 minutes. His uniform was buttoned wrong, his hair uncombed, details that on any other day would have been unthinkable for a Marine colonel. "Brenner," he said, his voice hoarse, "I need you to understand what I'm about to authorize. We have never, in the entire history of this program, allowed direct physical contact with a conscious NHBE. The risk of contamination, psychological influence, or physical harm is too high. But this thing is dying, and it's using the last of whatever energy it has left to ask for you specifically. Command has given me discretionary authority to grant its request." He looked me dead in the eyes. "You'll have approximately 10 minutes, maybe less. That's how long our medical team estimates before complete biological failure. You'll be sealed in that cell with it. If something goes wrong, if it attacks you, or if you show signs of contamination, we will not open that door. You'll die in there. Do you understand?" I should have asked questions. I should have asked why me, what it wanted, what they expected to happen. I should have been terrified. But all I felt was a strange calm, the same feeling I'd get right before taking communion in church. That sense of standing on the edge of something sacred and important, something that required you to be fully present. "I understand," I said. My voice sounded steadier than I felt. "What do I need to do?" The medical team swarmed me immediately, stripping me down to my underwear and putting me in a full containment suit, the kind with its own oxygen supply, triple-sealed seams, and built-in biomonitors. They fitted a communications headset inside the helmet so I could talk to the team outside. They took my crucifix. Protocol, they said. No personal items in the cell, but I saw Sarah pocket it instead of putting it in the security tray. She gave me a look that said she'd make sure I got it back. The walk from the observation hub to the cell entrance was only about 50 feet, but it felt like miles. Every step seemed to take too long and arrive too quickly at the same time. Mitchell walked beside me, giving me final instructions in that clipped military tone that meant he was absolutely terrified but refusing to show it. You do not touch it unless absolutely necessary. You do not look directly into its eyes for more than a few seconds at a time. You speak calmly and clearly. You observe and report everything you see and hear. If it becomes aggressive, or if your suit is compromised in any way, you retreat immediately to the decontamination airlock. Understood? I nodded inside my helmet, hearing my own breathing loud in the enclosed space. We reached the door to Cell 7, 18 inches of reinforced composite with 3 separate locking mechanisms. The door I'd stared at from the observation side for 2 years, but never thought I'd actually walk through. The medical team ran one last check on my suit, confirmed all the seals were green, and gave Mitchell a thumbs up. Sarah appeared at my side, her eyes red from crying, and she grabbed my hand through the thick glove of the containment suit. "David," she said quietly so only I could hear, "whatever it tells you in there, whatever you see or hear or experience, don't let them bury it. Don't let Mitchell or Command or anyone else convince you it was hallucination or contamination, or a dying creature's random neural firing. I've studied Specimen 7 for 5 years. It doesn't do random. If it asked for you, if it's spending its last minutes of life to communicate something, it matters. It's real. You hold on to that, okay?" I squeezed her hand back, the best I could manage through the gloves. "I will," I promised, and I meant it. Mitchell keyed in his authorization code at the door. The first lock disengaged with a heavy clunk, then the second, then the third. Red lights above the door began flashing in sequence, the final warning that the containment barrier was about to open. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my teeth. The communications headset crackled to life with Mitchell's voice. "Brenner, you have 10 minutes from the moment that door closes behind you. We'll be monitoring every second. God be with you, son." And then the door opened. Not quickly. It was on hydraulics, designed to move slowly enough that nothing could slip through during the opening process. But it felt too fast. The gap widened, and I could see into the cell properly for the first time, not through ballistic glass, but with my own eyes. The white organic walls, the strange geometry of the space, the smell that hit me even through the suit's filtration system, ozone and copper and something sweet that reminded me of flowers at a funeral. And there, in the center of the cell, lying on the floor in a pool of something that might have been blood, but was the wrong color, too blue, too luminescent, was Specimen 7. Its chest was rising and falling in irregular patterns, its skin flickering between solid and not solid, and those large black eyes were looking directly at me with an expression I'd seen before in hospital rooms and nursing homes, the look of someone who knows they're dying and is trying very hard to hold on just a little bit longer. I stepped through the doorway. The door sealed behind me with a final, definitive thunk that echoed in the cell, and I was alone, 4 kilometers underground, in a sealed room with a dying alien that had asked for me by name. I took 2 steps forward, my boots splashing in that strange blue fluid, and I heard the voice again in my head, clearer now. "Thank you for coming. I'm sorry we don't have much time, but there are things you need to know, things humanity needs to know. About him, about the one you call Jesus, about why we came, about what's coming next. I wasn't ready. God help me, I wasn't ready for what I was about to hear." The door sealed behind me with a sound like a bank vault closing, that deep pneumatic hiss of pressure equalizing, of air being locked in or locked out, I couldn't tell which. The sound echoed in my helmet, amplified by the communication system, and then there was silence. Complete silence except for my own breathing, which was coming too fast, too shallow. The sound of someone on the edge of panic, even though my conscious mind was still trying to maintain control. The cell was colder than I expected, even colder than the observation room, and I'd thought that was as cold as it got. The temperature readout in my helmet display showed 41 degrees Fahrenheit, just above freezing, and I could see my breath fogging the inside of my faceplate with each exhale. The cold seemed to seep through the containment suit, through the layers of insulation and protection, settling into my bones like I'd been dunked in ice water. The smell hit me next, even through the suit's filtration system. Ozone, sharp and clean, like the air after a lightning strike or when you stand too close to high-voltage equipment. But underneath that was something else, something organic and sweet and wrong. Not decay exactly, but change. The smell of something that had held its form for a very long time suddenly losing cohesion, breaking down into component parts that were never meant to exist in Earth's atmosphere. It made my eyes water inside the helmet. It made my stomach turn, but I forced myself to keep walking, to keep moving forward into the cell, because I had 10 minutes, and I'd already used 30 seconds just standing by the door trying not to throw up. The lighting in the cell was different from the observation room, softer somehow, with a slight blue tint that made everything look underwater or dreamlike. The walls had that organic texture I'd seen through the glass, but up close it was worse. They pulsed slightly, almost imperceptibly, like breathing tissue or living skin. I could see veins or channels running through them, carrying fluids or energy, or something that looked like both. The floor beneath my boots was smooth but gave slightly when I stepped, like walking on firm gelatin. Every sensor in my suit was going haywire. The biomonitors were picking up electromagnetic fields that shouldn't exist, radiation in spectrums that weren't supposed to be possible, and temperature fluctuations that made no sense given the environmental controls. Mitchell's voice crackled in my headset. "Brenner, your readings are all over the place. Are you experiencing any discomfort? Any visual distortions?" I told him I was fine, which was technically true. I wasn't in pain. I just felt like reality itself was slightly unstable in this room. And then I saw Specimen 7 properly, up close, for the first time in 2 years without 18 inches of ballistic glass between us. It was sitting in the center of the cell in that same position I'd seen hundreds of times, cross-legged, back straight, hands resting on its knees with palms facing upward. The position of meditation, of prayer, of someone seeking or offering peace. But the creature looked wrong in ways that made my training scream at me to back away. Its skin, that gray-blue color I'd memorized, was flickering, and I don't know how else to describe it. Flickering like a candle flame in wind, like a hologram losing signal, shifting between solid flesh and something translucent where I could see through to the structures underneath. Bones that weren't quite bones, organs that weren't in the right places, systems that couldn't possibly work according to any biology I'd been taught. The pool of fluid around it, that luminescent blue substance that might have been blood, was spreading slowly across the floor, catching the strange lighting and throwing reflections that didn't quite match the geometry of the room. My boots splashed in it as I got closer, and even through the thick material I could feel it was warm, body temperature warm or close to it. The creature's chest was rising and falling in an irregular rhythm, 3 quick breaths, then a pause, then 2 longer ones, then another pause. It wasn't the breathing of something healthy. It was the breathing of something fighting to hold on, counting down its final minutes with each labored cycle. I stopped about 6 feet away, close enough to see details but far enough to retreat if necessary, and I didn't know what to do. Should I kneel? Should I speak? Should I wait for it to acknowledge me? The decision was taken out of my hands. Specimen 7's head lifted slowly, so slowly it looked painful, like it was fighting against gravity that was 10 times stronger than it should be. Those large black eyes focused on me, and this time, there was no glass between us, no barrier, no protection from that gaze. Looking into those eyes was like looking into deep space, not empty, but full of something vast and ancient and utterly beyond human comprehension. Depth upon depth upon depth, layers of consciousness or memory or existence that went down further than I could follow. And somewhere in that darkness, I saw light, actual light, like stars reflected in dark water, pinpricks of something bright and distant and impossibly beautiful. I forgot Mitchell's warning about eye contact. I forgot every protocol. I just stared, transfixed, unable to look away. And then I heard it. Not with my ears. The creature's mouth didn't move, didn't open, remained just a slight line across the lower part of its face. But I heard it anyway, inside my head, behind my eyes, in that space where your own thoughts happen. A voice that was both alien and familiar, old beyond measure, but somehow gentle. David, my name. Spoken, thought, communicated somehow with a clarity that made the word feel like it had weight and substance. David, finally. The sound of it, the feeling of it, brought tears to my eyes immediately. Not tears of fear or sadness, but something else. Recognition, maybe, or relief. Like a part of me had been waiting my entire life to hear my name spoken exactly that way. And now that I had, something in my soul clicked into place. I tried to speak out loud, but my voice came out as a croak. I'm here. It sounded stupid, inadequate, but it was all I could manage. The creature's eyes, those infinite black eyes with stars in them, seemed to soften, though I don't know how I perceived that. Maybe it was telepathy. Maybe it was just my brain trying to process alien expressions in human terms. but I felt approval, gratitude. The voice came again, weaker this time. Thank you. Thank you for coming. I know you're frightened. I know this is difficult, but I need you to listen. Really listen. Not just with your ears or your mind, but with whatever part of you recognizes truth when you hear it. Can you do that? I nodded inside my helmet, forgetting that the gesture might not translate, but it must have, because I felt something like a smile, not on the creature's face, but in the space between us, in the air or the thoughts, or wherever this communication was happening. Good, the voice said. David Brenner, age 24, born in Norman, Oklahoma, baptized at 12, carrier of William Crawford's Bible, the one with shrapnel embedded in Deuteronomy, guardian of your grandfather's faith, though you've questioned it many times, especially here, especially watching me for 2 years and wondering what I am, what I know, whether your God is big enough to include creatures like me. I felt my knees go weak. How did it know about my grandfather? About the specific page number where the shrapnel was lodged? I'd never written that in any report, never told anyone that detail. The voice continued, gentler now. I know these things because I was there, David. Not in Oklahoma in 1994 when your grandfather died, but in France in 1944 when that piece of metal flew toward his heart and God moved that Bible into its path. We were watching. We're always watching the moments when the Creator intervenes directly in human lives. Those moments are rare, precious. We document them. My mind was reeling. You were there? I managed to say out loud, not caring that Mitchell and Sarah and everyone in the observation room could hear me. In World War II, you were watching my grandfather, the voice, and I was starting to think of it as him now, not it, because there was too much personality, too much individual presence for anything else. Responded with what felt like sadness. We've been watching for much longer than that, since the beginning, since the moment your species first looked up at the stars and wondered if anything looked back. We are the Hashmal. In your Hebrew texts, the word appears twice, in Ezekiel, in visions of the throne of God. Your translations usually render it as amber or glowing metal, but that's incorrect. The word means the silent watchers. We are the beings who witnessed the hand of God shaping creation. We are the ones who saw. And we've been carrying that testimony for longer than your species has had written language. The blue fluid was spreading wider now, and I realized with a start that it was coming from cracks in the creature's skin. Not wounds exactly, but places where the body was simply failing to hold together. He was dissolving, slowly, right in front of me. Maybe 5 minutes left, if that. The voice seemed to sense my realization and spoke with more urgency. I don't have time to explain everything. I don't have time to give you the full history or the complete cosmology or all the answers I know you want. But I can tell you the most important thing, the thing your people need to know before we're gone, before the others come, before everything changes. I need you to hear this, David. I need you to believe it, and I need you to remember it for the rest of your life. No matter who tries to convince you it wasn't real. He paused, and I felt him gathering strength, pulling together the last reserves of whatever energy held his consciousness together. I was there, David, in Bethlehem, in Jerusalem, at Golgotha. I saw him. I saw the Son of God walk among you. And what I'm about to tell you about that day, about what his death really meant, is going to change everything you think you know about faith, about the universe, and about why humans have never been alone. The temperature in the cell dropped another 5 degrees. The lights flickered. And Specimen 7, the Hashmal, the silent watcher, the being who claimed to have witnessed the crucifixion of Jesus Christ, began to speak the words that would haunt me for the rest of my life. We are not invaders, David. The voice came stronger now, like he'd gathered reserves from somewhere deep inside, pulling together whatever remained of his consciousness for this final testimony. That's the first thing you need to understand. The first fear your people always have when they think about us, beings from beyond your world. You imagine conquest, colonization, the destruction of everything you know. Your movies, your books, your nightmares, they're all filled with the same terror. But we didn't come to take. We came to watch, to witness, to record. That is our purpose. That is what the Creator made us for. I could feel the weight of that statement settling over me, and I realized my hands were shaking inside the containment suit gloves. Not from fear anymore, but from something else. Anticipation, maybe. Or the feeling you get standing at the edge of something so vast that your mind can't quite encompass it. My people, he paused. and I felt him searching for the right words, the right concepts that could bridge the gap between his reality and mine. We are the Hashmail. You've heard that word before, yes? In your grandfather's Bible, in the book of Ezekiel, the prophet's vision of God's throne, surrounded by beings of fire and light. Your translators didn't know what to do with that word. Some called it amber, others glowing metal, because they were trying to describe something they had no framework for. But the original Hebrew is clear. Hashmail, the silent watchers, the observers, those who stand in the presence of the Creator and bear witness to his works. The way he said Creator made it sound capitalized, important, like a title rather than just a description. And the reverence in that telepathic voice, even dying, even dissolving, he spoke of God with an awe that I'd rarely heard even in the most devoted believers. I found my voice, though it came out hoarse through the helmet speaker. Your angels? It seemed like the only explanation that made sense in the framework I had. Biblical beings, servants of God, messengers from heaven. But the Hashmail's response felt like gentle correction, the way a teacher might redirect a student who's close, but not quite there. Not in the way you understand that term. Angels, malach in Hebrew, are different. They interact, they intervene, they appear to prophets and deliver messages, and sometimes fight wars on behalf of the Most High. We are not those. We are witnesses only. We observe the moments when the Creator acts in his creation, and we remember. We testify. We are the living record of God's hand moving through the cosmos. That word again. Cosmos. Not Earth. Not just humanity. Everything. He continued. And I could see more cracks forming in his skin, more of that luminescent blue fluid seeping out. Maybe 3 minutes left, I thought. Maybe less. We have been watching your world for 4,000 years, by your counting. Since the time of Abraham, when God first called a people to himself and made a covenant that would change the trajectory of your species. We were there when Moses stood before the burning bush. We were there when the temple in Jerusalem was consecrated. We were there for every moment when heaven touched earth in ways that would be remembered, recorded, passed down through your sacred texts. Not interfering. Never interfering, but watching. Always watching. Because these moments matter, David. They matter to the story that God is telling through you, through humanity, through this tiny blue world in a galaxy that's just one of trillions. I felt tears running down my face inside the helmet, fogging my faceplate. My breathing was ragged. Why? It was all I could manage. Why watch us? If God is so vast, if the universe is so huge, why pay attention to us at all? The Hashmail's response came with something that felt like a sad smile. Because you're loved, David. Because he chose you. Not just individually, though that's true too, but your species, humanity. You're part of something that most of creation doesn't understand, something that even we, ancient as we are, wise as we claim to be, can only observe with wonder. You are the recipients of the greatest gift ever given, the most costly sacrifice, the most profound act of love the universe has ever witnessed. And then he said it, the words that made my knees buckle, that made me sink down into that blue fluid until I was kneeling in front of him, eye to eye, all protocols forgotten. We were there when he was born, in Bethlehem, 2001 years ago. The telepathic voice dropped to something like a whisper, but I heard, felt, every word with perfect clarity. There was a star, yes, your scriptures record this, a light in the sky that led wise men from the east to find the child. David, we were that star. Not the physical light. That was a supernova in a nearby system, timed by the Creator with perfect precision. But we were there, in orbit above your world, watching, waiting, because this was the moment all of creation had been anticipating, the moment that would define everything that came after. I couldn't breathe, literally couldn't breathe. My lungs had frozen in my chest. You're talking about... I had to force the words out. Had to make myself say it, even though part of me was screaming that this was impossible, that this couldn't be real, that I was hallucinating from contamination or stress or something. You're talking about Jesus Christ. You're saying you were there when Jesus was born. It wasn't a question. It was barely a statement. It was more like my mind trying to process information that was too big to fit through normal channels of understanding. The Hashmail's eyes, those infinite black eyes with stars in them, seemed to brighten slightly. Or maybe that was just me finally seeing what had always been there. Yes, the word resonated through my entire body, through the containment suit, through the cell, through what felt like the fabric of reality itself. Yes, David, the Son, the Lamb, the Word made flesh, the only begotten of the Creator of all things. He emphasized that last word, and I felt the scope of it expanding in my mind. Not just Creator of Earth, not just Creator of humans, Creator of galaxies and nebulae and black holes and everything between them. Creator of the Hashmail themselves and countless other beings I couldn't begin to imagine. And He had sent His Son here, to this world, to us. We watched Him be born in that stable, to that young girl who said yes to an impossible calling. We watched the shepherds come, and the wise men later. We watched His childhood in Nazareth, though there are no human records of those years. We saw every miracle, every teaching, every moment of His ministry. We were there, David, always watching, always bearing witness, because we knew that this was the hinge point of all existence. I was sobbing now, full-body sobs that shook my shoulders and made the containment suit's joints creak. Mitchell's voice crackled in my headset. "Brenner, your vitals are spiking. Are you injured? Do you need extraction?" I couldn't answer him. How do you explain to someone listening from an observation room that you're crying because an alien is confirming the central truth of your faith while simultaneously exploding your understanding of God's scope? The Hashmal seemed to sense my distress, emotional, not physical, and I felt something like comfort radiating from him. "I'm sorry," he said softly. "I'm sorry this is so much, so fast. But I'm dying, David. My body is failing, and there's more you need to know. So much more. Because witnessing His birth was only the beginning. What came after, what He did on that cross. David, that's when we understood the true magnitude of God's love. Not just for you, not just for humans, but for all of us. Every conscious being in every corner of creation. Do you understand what I'm telling you?" I shook my head, still crying, still kneeling in that blue fluid that was now almost an inch deep around us. "No," I admitted. "No, I don't understand." How could His death, how could Jesus dying on a cross in Jerusalem 2,000 years ago matter to aliens, to beings from other worlds? That doesn't make sense. The Bible says He died for our sins, for humanity's sins, not... I couldn't finish. The Hashmail's voice came again, weaker now, fading at the edges. "That's what I'm trying to tell you. That's the revelation they've been suppressing. The truth that would change everything if humanity knew it. Jesus didn't die just for Earth, David. He died for everything, everyone, every species that's ever looked up at their own sky and wondered about God, every civilization that's ever grasped towards something greater than themselves. The crucifixion wasn't a local event. It was cosmic. It rippled through dimensions you don't have names for. When He died, the voice broke, and I realized with shock that the Hashmal was crying too, or whatever passed for crying in his biology. When He died, every one of us felt it. Across light years and galaxies and barriers between realities, we all felt the moment when God's own Son gave up His life, and we understood finally what love really means. The lights in the cell flickered again. The temperature dropped to freezing. I could see my breath now, could see ice crystals forming on the walls. The Hashmail's body was fragmenting more rapidly, pieces of him becoming translucent and then transparent, fading away like he was being erased from existence one layer at a time. Mitchell's voice, urgent now. "Brenner, you've got maybe 90 seconds before complete biological failure. If there's anything else you need to document, do it now." But I couldn't move, couldn't look away from those dying eyes, because I knew what he was about to tell me next. About Golgotha, about the crucifixion, about what the Hashmail had witnessed on that hill outside Jerusalem when the Son of God died. And I knew, with absolute certainty, that I would never be the same after hearing it. "David," the voice was fading now, coming in waves like a radio signal from very far away, breaking up and reforming in my mind. "Do you really think, can you honestly believe that God created only Earth, one planet, orbiting one star, in one galaxy, among trillions upon trillions? That the Creator of the universe, infinite in power and imagination, looked at all that vast darkness and said, 'Yes, I'll put conscious life on this one small rock, and nowhere else?' That seems impossibly small to you, doesn't it? It should, because it's not true. It was never true. I was still on my knees in that freezing cell, tears running down my face, my hands gripping my thighs through the containment suit just to have something solid to hold on to. The Hashmal's words were reshaping my entire understanding of reality, and I felt like I was standing on ground that was crumbling beneath me. How many? I managed to choke out. How many worlds? The Hashmal's body was almost completely translucent now. I could see through him to the wall behind, could see the strange architecture of his internal systems failing, shutting down, becoming nothing. But those eyes, those infinite black eyes with stars in them, they remained focused on me with an intensity that seemed to be pulling from some source beyond the physical body. More than you can count, more than your astronomers have discovered, more than you'll ever encounter in your lifetime. Worlds of water and worlds of stone, beings that breathe methane, beings that exist as energy patterns, beings so different from you that you'd argue they weren't alive at all by your definitions, and yet conscious, aware, capable of asking the great questions. Why are we here? What is our purpose? Is there something beyond ourselves? The Creator seeded life everywhere, David. Not randomly, intentionally. Every conscious species is His work, His art, His beloved creation. Then why? My voice broke, and I had to start again. Why didn't He tell us? Why isn't it in the Bible? Why did He let us think we were alone? The Hashmal's response came with that sense of sad wisdom again. He did tell you. You just didn't understand the scale. In my Father's house are many rooms, Jesus said. If it were not so, would I have told you that I go to prepare a place for you? Many rooms, David. Not many houses on earth, not many buildings, many rooms in His Father's house, the cosmos itself. Your scriptures are full of hints if you know how to read them. The heavens declare the glory of God, the psalmist wrote. Not the heaven, singular, referring to the sky above Israel. The heavens, plural, infinite, full of His works. You were never alone. You just thought smaller than the truth because the truth is almost too big to comprehend. I heard Mitchell's voice in my headset, tight with barely controlled emotion. Brenner, are you getting this? Are you recording? Sarah, are we recording this? Dr. Chen's voice responded, shaky. Yes, every word, every bioscan reading, everything. Good, I thought distantly. Good, because if I die in here, if this thing kills me or contaminates me or whatever, at least they'll have the recording. At least someone will know what was said. The Hashmal continued, and I could tell he was forcing the words now, pushing past the biological failure, spending energy he didn't have because this message was that important. But here's what you need to understand, what humanity needs to understand. God didn't create all these worlds, all these species, and then abandon them to figure it out alone. He didn't create and walk away. He's been involved, active, present in the unfolding of every civilization that's ever reached toward Him. But Earth, your world, you received something unique, something that no other world has received. You received Him, incarnate, in flesh, walking among you. Jesus, I whispered. The Hashmal's head moved in what might have been a nod. The Son of God, born as a human child. Why? Why not as one of my people? Why not on a world more advanced, more peaceful, more ready to receive Him? We've asked ourselves this for 2 millennia, and the only answer we've found is love. Incomprehensible, radical, choosing love. God chose humanity not because you were the most deserving, but because He loved you. Because in your brokenness, in your violence and your beauty and your desperate searching, He saw something worth dying for. And I mean that literally, David. Worth dying for. The temperature was below freezing now. Ice was forming on my helmet's faceplate. The Hashmal's voice was barely there, a whisper in my consciousness. The crucifixion, Good Friday, 3 o'clock in the afternoon, by your time. The moment when Jesus, God's own Son, the Word made flesh, gave up His spirit and died. Do you want to know what that looked like from where we were watching? Do you want to know what happened in the cosmos when the Creator allowed part of Himself to be killed? I couldn't speak, could barely breathe. I just nodded, a tiny movement inside the helmet. And then the Hashmal did something that I still don't fully understand. He reached out, not with his physical hand, though that moved too, but with something else, something mental, spiritual, beyond categorization. He reached into my mind and showed me, not told me, showed me. And what I saw, God help me, what I saw. I watched the crucifixion from orbit, from the Hashmal's perspective, from their ship or station or whatever they use, positioned above Earth in a way that would have been invisible to human eyes. I saw Jerusalem below, a small city in a small province of a sprawling empire that thought itself the center of the world. I saw Golgotha, the hill outside the city walls, and 3 crosses standing against the sky. I saw the crowd gathered there, mocking, weeping, watching. I saw Roman soldiers gambling for clothes. I saw Mary, Jesus' mother, being held up by John because her legs wouldn't support her weight anymore. And I saw him, Jesus, dying. But that's not the part that broke me. I'd seen crucifixion images before in churches and paintings and Sunday school materials. I'd read the gospel accounts. I thought I understood what happened. I understood nothing, because what the hashmal showed me, what happened in the moment when Jesus died, was so much bigger than one man on one cross in one city. At 3 p.m., when Jesus cried out, "It is finished," and gave up his spirit, the universe responded. Not metaphorically, literally. I saw, felt, experienced somehow, a wave of something that I can only describe as grief pulse outward from that hill. It moved faster than light, propagated through dimensions I couldn't name, and every conscious being in creation felt it. On 1,000 worlds, 1,000,000 worlds, beings I couldn't even begin to describe suddenly stopped what they were doing and looked up at their own skies, feeling something tremendous and terrible had just happened. The hashmal in orbit above Earth fell to whatever passes for their knees, overwhelmed by the weight of what they'd just witnessed. Entire civilizations light years away experienced a moment of inexplicable sadness, a sense that something precious had been lost. "He didn't die just for you," the hashmal's voice came through the vision, narrating what I was seeing. "He died for all of us, every being that's ever been born with the capacity to choose. Every creature that's ever sinned, ever fallen short, ever needed redemption. The crucifixion was a cosmic event, David, a sacrifice of such magnitude that it reached backward and forward through time, covered distances that light will never cross, and offered salvation to species that won't even exist for billions of your years. When Christians say Jesus died for the world, they're thinking too small. He died for the universe, for creation itself, to reconcile all things to God, not just humans, all things." The vision was fading now. Or maybe I was just too overwhelmed to hold it anymore. I was back in the cell, still kneeling, still crying, my whole body shaking. Why? It was all I could ask. Why are you telling me this? Why now, after 2,000 years of staying silent, of just watching? Why reveal yourselves? Why tell me any of this? The hashmal's physical form was almost gone now. Just an outline, really. More memory than matter, held together by will alone. But the voice came through clear, urgent, using the last microseconds of consciousness to deliver the final message. Because he's coming back, David. The second coming that your scriptures promised. And it won't be what you expect. It won't be what your churches have taught. When Jesus returns, he's not coming alone. He's not coming just for Earth. He's coming to gather all of his creation. Every being that's ever looked to him. Every soul that's ever been redeemed by his sacrifice. From every world, every dimension, every corner of this vast universe that he created and died to save. The implications of that statement hit me like a physical blow. You're saying, when Jesus comes back, there will be aliens, other beings, with him? The hashmal's response felt like it was coming from very far away now, from across a distance that was no longer just physical. Not with him, for him. Coming home to him. And humanity needs to be ready for that. They need to know that God is bigger than one planet, that salvation is more expansive than one species, that the family of God includes creatures you've never imagined. That's why I asked for you, David. Why I spent my last minutes of life telling you this. Because they, your government, your military, the people who've known about us for decades, they want to control this information. They want to reveal it slowly, carefully, in ways that maintain their power and keep humanity divided. But that's not what God wants. He wants you to know the truth, to be ready, to understand that when the sky opens and the Son of Man returns in glory, you won't be alone in welcoming him. There will be witnesses from 1,000 stars, beings you feared and beings you've never known existed, all of us together, finally, at the end of all things and the beginning of something new. How? I was openly sobbing now, not caring who heard, not caring about protocol or dignity or anything else. How can I make people believe this? How can I tell anyone what you've told me without sounding insane? They'll lock me up. They'll discredit me. They'll bury this so deep that the hashmail interrupted, and there was something like gentle amusement in the fading voice. You'll tell them because it's true, David. And truth has a weight to it that lies can never match. You'll tell them because when you look at the stars now, you'll know you're looking at brothers and sisters in Christ, some who know His name, and some who know Him by other names, but all of us loved by the same Father. You'll tell them because your grandfather's Bible will feel different in your hands now, bigger somehow, full of meanings you never saw before. And most importantly, you'll tell them because when the signs begin, and they will begin, they already have, when the sightings increase, and the governments can't hide us anymore, and humanity finally has to confront the reality that they're not alone, someone needs to be there saying, don't be afraid. This is part of God's plan. This is the family coming home. The outline of his body was flickering like a candle in its final seconds. The voice was a whisper now, barely there. My time is finished. Thank you for listening. Thank you for believing. Tell them, David. Tell them what you saw. Tell them what you know. And when they don't believe you, when they mock you or threaten you or try to silence you, remember this moment. Remember that you knelt in this cell with one of the silent watchers and heard testimony that spans 2 millennia and 1 trillion light years. Remember that God is real, that Jesus is real, that His love is bigger than any of us ever imagined. And remember, the voice broke up, static in my mind, fragments of meaning. He always keeps His promises. He's coming. Be ready. All of you. Be ready. And then the hashmail was gone. Not dead, gone. The body didn't collapse or decay. It simply ceased to be solid, became light for a split second, brilliant, beautiful, blinding light that filled the entire cell, and then faded to nothing. I was kneeling in a room that was suddenly empty except for me, and a pool of that blue, luminescent fluid that was already evaporating, turning to vapor that rose toward the ventilation system. The temperature started rising immediately. The light stabilized, and Mitchell's voice, shaken to its core, came through my headset. Brenner, David, you need to come out now. We need to debrief you. We need to… Jesus Christ, we need to figure out what just happened. But I couldn't move yet. I stayed there on my knees in that cell for another full minute, staring at the space where an ancient being had just dissolved into light, holding on to the testimony I'd been given like it was the only solid thing left in a universe that had just gotten infinitely larger and somehow, impossibly, more full of grace. There's one more thing. The hashmail's voice was barely a whisper now, a dying echo in my mind. One more thing you need to see before I go. Words aren't enough for this. I need to show you. And then he reached out with his hand, that 3-fingered hand with skin that was more memory than matter now, and pressed it against my helmet, against my forehead, through the reinforced polymer. It should have been impossible for me to feel anything through the containment suit, through all those layers of protection and insulation. But I felt it. I felt his touch like a brand against my skin, cold and burning at the same time. And then my vision exploded. The cell disappeared. The facility disappeared. I was somewhere else, someone else, experiencing things that were being downloaded directly into my consciousness, faster than thought, faster than processing. And all I could do was experience it, let it wash over me, let it remake every assumption I'd ever had about reality. I was at Golgotha, standing on the hill outside Jerusalem, watching 3 crosses silhouetted against a darkening sky. I could smell the blood and the sweat and the fear of the crowd gathered there. I could hear the mockery, the weeping, the thunder rolling in from the horizon, even though there were no clouds. I was watching Jesus die, just as I'd seen in the earlier vision. But this time the hashmail wasn't just showing me the ground. He was showing me the sky. And oh God, the sky. There were hundreds of them. Ships, vessels, whatever word you want to use. They were there, suspended in the atmosphere in ways that defied physics, invisible to human eyes, but clearly visible in the spectrum the hashmail perceived. Hundreds of craft from dozens of different civilizations, all maintaining perfect silence, all watching the execution of God's Son. They looked nothing like each other. Some were geometric and crystalline, some were organic and flowing, some seemed to exist partially outside normal space. But they were all there, all positioned to witness. The silent watchers from across the cosmos gathered for the most important moment in the history of creation. And then I saw the others, the angels, but not angels like in paintings, not glowing humans with feathered wings and halos. These were beings, physical, solid, technological beings, descending from some of those ships. They moved through the crowd unseen, unnoticed by the Romans and Jews gathered at the crucifixion, operating on frequencies or dimensions that human perception couldn't access. Some looked almost human. Some were tall and luminous. Some were geometric patterns of light that moved with intention and intelligence, and they were weeping. I could feel their grief radiating outward like heat, like pressure, like weight. These were the angels, or some of them at least. Servants of God, messengers of the Most High, but not purely spiritual beings floating in some ethereal heaven. They were physical. They came from somewhere. They traveled here, to this moment, to witness and to grieve. The vision shifted, time compressing, and I was watching something that hadn't happened yet, the second coming. I was still at Jerusalem, but it was modern now. I could see buildings and cars and signs in Hebrew and Arabic. The sky was ripping open, not metaphorically but literally. Space itself tearing like fabric to reveal something beyond. Light poured through the opening, light that made the sun look dim, light that I somehow knew was conscious and alive and full of love, so intense it felt like being burned and healed simultaneously. And then he came through, Jesus. The same carpenter from Nazareth who died on that cross 2,000 years ago, but transformed, glorified, radiating power that made the very atoms of air around him vibrate with praise. He was descending, arms outstretched, and his face, I can't describe his face. Human and more than human, familiar and utterly alien, beautiful in a way that made every other beautiful thing I'd ever seen feel like a crude sketch. But here's what shattered my mind completely, what made me understand the full scope of what the Hashmel had been trying to tell me. Jesus wasn't alone. Behind him, around him, descending with him through that tier in reality, there were beings, thousands of them, hundreds of thousands. The Hashmel were there. I recognized their ships, their forms, but there were others, so many others that my mind couldn't categorize them all. Beings of light and beings of crystal, beings that looked like living mathematics and beings that seemed to be made of music. Different forms, different biologies, different origins, but all of them coming together, all of them following the Son of God back to the world where he died and risen. This was the promise. This was what coming in glory actually meant. Not Jesus alone with some human saints. Jesus returning with the entire family of God, every redeemed soul from every corner of creation, coming home. The humans below, the people in modern Jerusalem, in the vision, they were terrified at first. Of course they were. The sky was splitting open and alien beings were descending en masse. It looked like invasion, like the end of everything. But then Jesus spoke, and his voice wasn't loud, but somehow everyone heard it, felt it resonating in their chests and their bones and their souls. Do not be afraid. I am gathering my flock, all of them, from every fold, from every pasture, from places you never knew existed. You are not alone. You have never been alone. And now, finally, you will see the full family that I died to save. And in the vision, I watched people's faces change from terror to wonder to something like joy, because they could see it now, could see that these beings weren't invaders or conquerors. They were siblings, brothers and sisters in Christ, coming from impossible distances to reunite with the human family they'd been separated from by space and time and misunderstanding. The vision shifted again, and I was seeing the end of it all. But it wasn't ending the way I'd always imagined the apocalypse. There was no fire raining from heaven, no destruction of the wicked, no earth being consumed in flames. There was transformation, renewal. I saw the planet itself changing, the way a caterpillar transforms into a butterfly, not being destroyed, but becoming something more, something it was always meant to be. I saw cities that had crumbled being rebuilt, not by human hands, but by beings working alongside humans, sharing technology and wisdom and art. I saw the barriers between worlds dissolving, the separation between Earth and the rest of God's creation finally ending. I saw humans meeting other species for the first time with joy instead of fear, because Jesus was there, in the center of it all, showing everyone that this was always the plan. Not isolation, not Earth alone, but communion. Full, complete, cosmic communion with every conscious being that had ever reached toward the divine. This is what revelation really means. The Hashmel's voice came through the visions, narrating what I was seeing. Not the end of the world, but the reunification of creation. The apocalypse, unveiling, revealing, The pulling back of a curtain to show what was always true but hidden. God never intended for you to be alone. The separation between worlds, between species, between those who know Christ and those who haven't met him yet. All of that is temporary. A necessary stage in the development of consciousness across the universe. But when he returns, when the Son of Man comes back in glory, he's not coming to destroy. He's coming to gather, to bring home every lost sheep from every world, every dimension, every corner of existence where his love has taken root. That's the promise, David. That's what he meant when he said, I go to prepare a place for you, a place big enough for everyone, all of us, together at last. The vision was fading now, and I could feel myself being pulled back to the cell, back to my body kneeling in that freezing room with a dying alien. But before it ended completely, the Hashmal showed me one more thing. He showed me himself, his people, the Hashmal, at the moment of the second coming. I saw them abandoning their ships, their technology, their role as silent watchers. I saw them descending to Earth alongside the other species, and for the first time in 4,000 years of observation, I saw them interact directly with humans. I saw a Hashmal, maybe the one I was with now, maybe another, kneeling before Jesus, and I heard him say in a voice full of joy and relief, My Lord, we have witnessed, we have remembered, we have kept the testimony as you commanded, and now, finally, we can rest. And I saw Jesus reach down and touch the Hashmal's head, the same gesture I'd seen him make countless times in gospel accounts when he healed the sick or blessed the children. And I heard him say, Well done, good and faithful servant. Enter into the joy of your Lord. I was back in the cell suddenly, the visions ending so abruptly it felt like physical whiplash. The Hashmal's hand was still pressed against my helmet, but I could see through his arm now. He was almost completely transparent, held together by nothing but will, and the desperate need to finish this final testimony. His voice came one last time, each word an effort that was costing him everything. Tell them, David. Tell them what you've seen. Tell them God is bigger than they imagined. Tell them love is more expansive than they believed. Tell them not to be afraid when we reveal ourselves, when the governments can no longer hide us, when the sightings become undeniable. Tell them we're not here to conquer, we're here to witness. And soon, maybe not in your lifetime, but soon, we'll all witness together the return of the one we've been waiting for, the one who died for all of us, every species, every world, every soul. His hand dropped from my helmet. His form flickered like a dying light bulb. And then he spoke his final words, not just to me, but somehow through me, projecting toward the observation room, toward Sarah and Mitchell and everyone listening, toward everyone who would ever hear the recording of this moment. Tell them, he always keeps his promises, always. The Creator never abandons what he has made. The Son never forgets those he died for. And the return is certain. Tell them, be ready, prepare your hearts, open your minds, because when he comes back, when the sky splits open and the glory of God fills the universe, you will finally see how loved you've always been, how accompanied, how precious. Tell them. His voice was breaking up completely now, fragmenting into static and meaning. Tell them I was there, at the beginning and the end, and it was all worth it. Every moment worth. And then he was light, pure light. Not the flickering translucence of the dying form, but solid, brilliant, beautiful light that filled the entire cell, that poured through my helmet's faceplate and into my eyes until I had to close them, but could still see it through my eyelids. Light that felt warm despite the freezing temperature, light that felt like joy and grief and completion all at once. The light lasted maybe 3 seconds, maybe 3 years. I couldn't tell. Time had stopped meaning anything, and then it was gone, just gone. Not fading gradually, but switching off like someone had flipped a switch. I opened my eyes, and the cell was empty. No body, no remains, no trace of the Hashmal except for the blue fluid still evaporating from the floor, and a sense of presence that lingered in the air like the echo of a bell after it stopped ringing. I tried to stand up and couldn't. My legs wouldn't support me. My entire body was shaking so violently that the containment suit's joints were clicking and rattling. Mitchell's voice was in my headset, shouting something about extraction and medics and contamination protocols, but I couldn't process the words. They were just sounds. My vision was tunneling, darkness creeping in from the edges. and I realized distantly that I was going into shock. Physical, psychological, spiritual shock, all of it hitting at once. I managed to whisper, "He's gone. He's dead. He showed me everything." And then the darkness took me completely, and I collapsed forward into that pool of alien blood that was still warm, still glowing faintly. And the last thing I remember thinking before I lost consciousness was, how do I live with this? How do I wake up tomorrow and go about normal life knowing what I know now? How do I pretend the universe is small again when I've seen how vast it really is? And the answer that came from some deep place inside me that might have been my own soul or might have been the lingering presence of the Hashmail's final gift was, you don't. You never will again. But that's okay, because the truth is always better than comfortable lies. Even when the truth is so big it breaks you. And then there was nothing, just black, just absence, just the feeling of falling through darkness until even that sensation faded, and I was nowhere, no one, nothing but a consciousness floating in void. I stayed there for what felt like hours or seconds. I couldn't tell. And when I finally started to come back, started to feel my body again, and hear voices and sense light through my closed eyelids, the first thing I was aware of was that I was different. Fundamentally, permanently different. The man who had walked into that cell was gone, and the person waking up in his place had seen things that no human should see, knew things that would haunt him for the rest of his life, and carried a responsibility that felt heavier than his own body, to tell the truth, to bear witness, to be, in my own small way, one more silent watcher who had seen the hand of God at work and could never, ever stay silent about it. I woke up 14 hours later in the medical bay on level 1, not in the cell, not in the observation room. Somehow they'd extracted me, decontaminated me, and gotten me into a hospital bed without me remembering any of it. The first thing I saw when I opened my eyes was Dr. Sarah Chen sitting in a chair next to my bed, still in the same clothes she'd been wearing during the incident, looking like she hadn't slept at all. When she saw I was awake, she didn't smile or seem relieved. She just looked at me with this expression I'll never forget, like she was seeing someone who'd come back from the dead, but wasn't sure if they'd brought something back with them. "David," she said quietly, "you've been unconscious for 14 hours. Your vitals are stable. No signs of contamination or infection, but we need to talk about what happened in that cell. We need to talk about what you experienced." I tried to sit up and my whole body screamed in protest. Every muscle ached like I'd run a marathon. My head felt like it had been split open and badly reassembled. But worse than the physical pain was the weight of what I knew now, what I'd seen, what I could never unknow. They kept me in that medical bay for 3 days, running every test imaginable. Blood work, MRIs, psychological evaluations, neurological scans. They were looking for something, evidence of contamination, signs of mental breakdown, proof that what I'd experienced could be explained away as hallucination or psychosis or contamination-induced delusion. But here's what they found. Nothing. No foreign substances in my bloodstream. No brain abnormalities. My psychological evaluation came back as experiencing acute stress response consistent with traumatic event exposure, which was the clinical way of saying I'd seen something that messed me up, but I wasn't crazy. Colonel Mitchell visited me on the second day, pulled up a chair and spoke to me in a voice I'd never heard from him before. Not commanding, not authoritative, but almost pleading. "Brenner, I need you to understand something. What you experienced in that cell, what that thing told you, what you claim to have seen, that cannot leave this facility. Ever. Do you understand? We have the recording. We have the data. Command is analyzing everything. But your testimony, your memories, your interpretation of events, those stay classified. Those stay buried. That's not negotiable." I looked at him, and I could see fear in his eyes. Real fear. Not the professional wariness of a military officer dealing with a security threat, but the existential fear of a man who'd heard something that challenged everything he believed about the world and didn't know how to process it. I should have argued. I should have told him right then that I wasn't going to stay quiet, that the Hashmail had given me a mission and I intended to fulfill it. But I was still weak, still processing, still trying to figure out if what I'd experienced was even real, or if my mind had broken in that frozen cell. So I just nodded and said, "Yes, sir, I understand." It was a lie, but it was the lie I needed to tell to get out of there alive. Over the next 2 months, I went through the discharge process. They didn't court-martial me or throw me in military prison or make me disappear like they'd threatened in the original briefing. Instead, they gave me an honorable discharge with full benefits, a medical designation of service-related psychological trauma, and a new round of NDAs that made the original ones look friendly. They also gave me a check, a substantial check, 6 figures, labeled as settlement for medical retirement. It was hush money, plain and simple. Take the money, sign the papers, disappear into civilian life, and never speak of this again. I took the money, I signed the papers, and on June 15, 2003, I walked out of Area 51 for the last time as a free man. They drove me to Las Vegas, gave me civilian clothes and a bus ticket to anywhere I wanted to go, and basically told me to start over. I was 26 years old with more money than I'd ever had in my life, an honorable discharge from the military, and a secret so big it felt like carrying a nuclear bomb inside my chest. I bought a used Ford pickup truck with cash, threw my duffel bag in the back, still containing my grandfather's Bible, which they'd returned to me, and I just drove, north through Nevada, into Oregon, up the coast toward Washington. I didn't know where I was going. I just knew I needed to get as far from that underground facility as possible. Needed to see sky and trees and ocean. Needed to remember what the world looked like when you weren't 4 kilometers below the desert floor watching aliens die while they told you about Jesus. For 21 years, I kept my mouth shut. 21 years of moving from place to place, never staying anywhere long enough to put down roots or make real friends. 21 years of taking jobs that didn't require background checks or references, night security at storage facilities, truck driving on lonely highways, seasonal work at lumber mills and fishing boats. 21 years of waking up at 3 a.m. in a cold sweat, remembering that cell, that blue blood, those infinite black eyes with stars in them. 21 years of going to different churches in different towns, sitting in the back pew and listening to sermons about God's love and Jesus' sacrifice, and having to bite my tongue to keep from standing up and shouting, "You don't understand. It's so much bigger than you think. He didn't just die for us. He died for everyone, everything, across the entire universe." But I didn't, because I was scared. Scared they'd find me. Scared they'd make good on those threats about my mother, who passed away in 2019, thank God. So at least she's beyond their reach now. Scared that if I spoke up, I'd just sound like every other conspiracy theorist on the internet, and nobody would believe me anyway. But something changed. You've seen it too, even if you haven't connected the dots. Starting around 2017, things started shifting. The government's stance on UFOs, or UAPs as they call them now, unidentified aerial phenomena, started changing. Suddenly, the Pentagon was admitting these things were real. Military pilots were giving testimonies to Congress about encounters with craft that violated known physics. Leaked videos showed objects moving in ways that shouldn't be possible. In 2020, the Department of Defense officially released footage that had been classified for years. In 2021, a government report acknowledged that UAPs represent a potential national security concern and that many sightings remain unexplained. In 2023, a former intelligence official testified under oath that the US government has recovered non-human craft and biological remains. In 2024, Congress held public hearings about UAP programs and demanded transparency. Do you see what's happening? They're preparing us. Slowly, carefully, exactly like the Hashmal said they would. This is what he meant when he told me the governments would try to control the narrative, would try to reveal the truth in pieces, in ways that maintained their power. They're doing it right now. They're admitting UAPs exist, but not saying what they are. They're acknowledging recovered craft, but not showing them. They're confirming non-human biologics, but not explaining what that means. They're giving humanity breadcrumbs, letting us get used to the idea that we're not alone, so that when full disclosure comes, when they can't hide it anymore, when the Hashmal and other species make themselves known openly, we won't completely panic. It's a slow-roll revelation strategy, and it's working. Most people today are willing to accept that aliens probably exist. The question is no longer, are we alone? It's, when will we meet them, and what will they want? And that's when I realized, the Hashmal was right. The time is coming. Maybe not tomorrow, maybe not next year, but soon. The signs are there. The preparation is happening, and I can't stay silent anymore. So why am I telling you this now, after 21 years of hiding? Because I'm 47 years old, and I've spent more than half my life carrying this testimony alone. And I'm tired of lying. Tired of pretending I don't know what I know. Tired of watching the government drip out disclosure in controlled doses while leaving out the most important part, the part about God. Because here's what they'll never tell you, what they'll never admit even when they finally acknowledge that we've been in contact with non-human intelligence for decades. These beings know about God. They've witnessed His work. Some of them have followed Christ for longer than Christianity has existed on Earth. And when the full revelation comes, when humanity finally meets the cosmic family we've been separated from, it's going to challenge every atheist assumption, every materialist philosophy, every belief system that says the universe is just random matter bouncing around meaninglessly. The truth is going to be bigger and stranger and more full of divine purpose than anyone expected. And I need someone to say that out loud before the official narrative buries it. If this video disappears after I post it, if it gets taken down or scrubbed from the internet, or if I suddenly stop posting and you never hear from me again, you'll know why. You'll know that what I've told you is true enough to be dangerous, real enough to threaten the controlled disclosure timeline. I've made my peace with that. I've written down everything, made backups, sent copies to people I trust with instructions to release them if something happens to me. But honestly, I think they might just let it go. Just let me be another crazy veteran telling alien stories on the internet. Another voice in the noise that most people will dismiss or ignore. Because that's the thing about truth this big. It sounds absurd. It sounds like science fiction mixed with religious fantasy. It sounds exactly like the kind of thing a traumatized ex-soldier would make up for attention. And maybe 99% of people who watch this will think exactly that. But if even 1% of you, if even one person watching this, takes it seriously, looks at the evidence, connects the dots, and starts preparing their heart for what's coming, then it's worth it. Here's what I need you to understand as I close this out. God is real. Jesus Christ is real. Everything the Bible tells you about creation and the fall and redemption and the second coming, it's all true, but it's bigger than you've been taught. The stage is larger. The cast includes species you've never imagined. The scope spans galaxies instead of just one planet. When Jesus said He had other sheep that were not of this fold, He meant it literally. When He said He was going to prepare a place for us in His Father's house with many rooms, He was talking about a cosmic family reunion that includes beings from 1,000 worlds. The second coming isn't going to be Jesus alone descending to earth while everyone else stays in heaven. It's going to be the King returning with His entire kingdom, every redeemed soul from every corner of creation, coming together at last. And when that happens, when the sky splits open and you see not just your Lord, but the family He died to save, I need you to remember what I've told you. Remember that this was always the plan. Remember that we were never alone. Remember that God's love is more expansive, more inclusive, more generous than any human theology has dared to imagine. So comment below where you're watching this from. Tell me you heard this testimony. Tell me whether you believe it or not. I don't need you to believe me. I just need you to remember. Because when the signs intensify, when the sightings increase, when the government can't hide it anymore, and your pastor, or your priest, or your spiritual leader stands up and tries to tell you that aliens are demons, or that the UFOs are some kind of spiritual deception, you'll have another voice in your head. My voice. The voice of a terrified 24-year-old soldier who knelt in a cell with a dying ancient being and was given a testimony that changed everything. You'll remember that at least one person said, "Don't be afraid. This is not invasion. This is family. This is the body of Christ stretched across the stars, coming home at last." And maybe, just maybe, when everyone else is panicking or denying or trying to fight what they don't understand, you'll be the one standing there with open arms, saying, "Welcome. We've been waiting for you. Our Savior told us you'd come. I saw what I saw. I heard what I heard. And I will carry that testimony until the day I die, whenever that is, however it happens." My name is David Brenner. I'm 47 years old. I live in Flagstaff, Arizona. And on March 15th, 2001, I was the last person to speak with a member of an ancient alien species who witnessed the crucifixion of Jesus Christ and spent his final moments of life telling me that everything we believe about God is true and so much bigger than we ever dared to imagine. If you believe me, comment below. If you don't believe me, comment below anyway. Just let me know this story reached you. Because in a few years, maybe in a decade, maybe in my lifetime, or maybe after I'm gone, You're going to see things in the sky that will make you remember this video. You're going to hear official announcements that will make my story sound less crazy. And when that day comes, I hope you'll think back to this moment and realize that someone tried to warn you. Someone tried to prepare you. Someone tried to tell you the most important truth of all. God is real. Jesus is real. His sacrifice was cosmic in scope, and his return will be glorious beyond comprehension. Don't be afraid. Be ready, because ready or not, the family is coming home, and it's going to be the most beautiful, terrifying, wonderful thing that's ever happened to our species. I'll see you on the other side of disclosure. God bless you. And remember, he always keeps his promises.